Have you ever found yourself staring at the ceiling at night, wondering why any of this matters? The world moves forward. People wake up. They chase their routines. They work. They talk. They laugh. And yet inside, you feel a silence. A silence so vast that it makes every sound outside seem hollow. What do you do when you wake up and the first thought is not about possibility, but about the pointlessness of even moving your body out of bed? Perhaps you have felt it recently, that weight of futility pressing on your chest. Not exactly despair, not quite sadness, but an empty grayness that colors every experience. It's not the sharp sting of pain, but the dull ache of nothingness, and sometimes that can feel even heavier. When life feels pointless, the mind drifts into questions that do not have immediate answers. Why am I here? What is all this for? Why does nothing I do seem to matter in the grand scope of things? And if nothing matters, why should I continue? These questions may sound terrifying, but they are not foreign to the human experience. They are questions that countless thinkers, philosophers, and ordinary people have carried in their hearts. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his Meditations, "Consider how swiftly all things are dissolved and resolved, the bodies and substances themselves, but also the memories of them. What is lasting? Only that which we cultivate within." He knew, even as an emperor, that life is fleeting, and that its apparent meaning can slip through our fingers. But you are here now, listening, which means perhaps you are searching, and in that search, you are not alone. Think of life as a long walk through a foggy forest. The trees stand around you, quiet and unmoving, yet the path ahead disappears into mist. You cannot see where it leads. Sometimes you can barely even see the next step. You hesitate. Should you keep walking? Or should you sit down convinced that wandering in circles is all there is? What if I told you that this fog is not a barrier, but an invitation to slow down, to question, to pay attention to the step right beneath your feet? When the sense of meaning vanishes, it is not always a sign that life has lost its value. It can also be a sign that you are on the threshold of discovering meaning in a deeper, quieter way. What if the emptiness you feel is not the end, but the beginning of seeing differently? Ask yourself, when was the last time something truly moved you? A moment of silence in nature? A gesture of kindness? The simple beauty of light falling through the window? Did you notice how those moments pierced through the grayness, even if only for a second? Meaning is often not lost forever. It hides. It recedes behind the noise of routines, expectations, and exhaustion. And when you feel life is pointless, perhaps it is because you are finally noticing that the old meanings, the ones handed to you by society, by work, by the pressure to achieve, are no longer enough. Perhaps you are being invited to seek something truer. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." But what if wasting life is not only about distraction or pleasure-seeking, but also about holding on to shallow definitions of what life should mean? If what once gave you a sense of direction no longer works, is that failure, or is it growth? Imagine standing at a crossroads. To your left, the familiar road continues, the road of old beliefs, habits, and roles that once seemed solid. To your right, another road appears, unfamiliar and uncertain, shrouded in mist. Standing still feels unbearable, but stepping forward feels frightening. Which way would you go? And yet, perhaps, the deeper question is not which road you choose, but how you walk. Do you drag your feet with resentment, or do you step gently, curiously, with the awareness that every step can carry meaning, even if the destination is unclear? This moment of emptiness you feel, can you see it not as a void, but as a clearing? The old structures have crumbled, and now, in this open field, you have space to plant something new. Albert Camus once observed, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer." He understood that even in the bleakest seasons, there remains a quiet flame that refuses to go out. Could it be that your sense of pointlessness is winter, and that within you, a hidden summer still waits to be uncovered? So let me ask you, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for meaning to appear like sunlight breaking through clouds? Or can you allow yourself to look closer, to notice the small sparks, the warmth of someone's smile, the comfort of a familiar song, the resilience of your own breath? What if these sparks are enough to begin? Life feels pointless when we measure it only against grand, unshakable meanings, the kind that promise certainty. But meaning is rarely permanent. It is fragile, shifting, like a river flowing beneath fog. You do not control the entire river, but you can step into it. You can feel its current. You can let it carry you, not to the final destination, but to the next bend. So when emptiness speaks, listen. Do not rush to silence it with noise or shallow distractions. Let it ask you the questions you've avoided. Let it show you the fragility of all that you once believed. And then, gently ask yourself, what if the meaning I seek is not out there, waiting to be discovered, but in here, waiting to be created? This is where our journey begins, not with immediate answers, but with deeper questions. Not with final clarity, but with the courage to sit with uncertainty. And perhaps in that stillness, you may begin to notice the faint outline of a new horizon forming within the fog. When life feels hollow, it is easy to believe that you are the first to walk this path of doubt. But you are not. Long before you, others felt the same grayness and stood in the same fog. The Stoics, living almost 2,000 years ago, knew this struggle well. And though their world was different, their questions were remarkably close to yours. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor surrounded by war, disease, and betrayal, wrote not for others but for himself. In the quiet of his tent, he reminded his weary heart, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What does this mean for you? When the world feels pointless, when everything outside seems indifferent, Marcus suggests that the meaning you crave is not always out there in the shifting chaos of events. It may be within, in the way you choose to meet life's uncertainty. Can you see the power in that? If the weight of pointlessness comes from trying to control things you cannot, what would happen if you shifted your gaze to what is still yours? Your choices, your actions, your way of responding. Think of it like standing in a storm. The winds rage, the sky darkens, and the rain refuses to stop. You cannot command the storm to pass, but you can decide how you will stand in it. Will you curse the sky, or will you plant your feet and let the storm remind you of your own endurance? Seneca, another Stoic voice, wrote, "Life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future." He knew that much of our despair is not about the present moment itself, but about the way we stretch ourselves thin between regrets and fears. When you say life feels pointless, is it because you are living too much in the weight of what was and the uncertainty of what will be? What if you gave the present moment, this very step, more attention? Could it be that meaning often slips through your fingers simply because you are not holding it where it actually exists? Epictetus, once a slave who rose to become a teacher, reminded his students, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." Imagine that. What if the emptiness you feel is not an unchangeable reality, but a lens, a way of looking? And if so, could you choose to look differently? Ask yourself, what if the question, "What is the meaning of life?" is too heavy to answer, but the question, "What meaningful thing can I do today?" is lighter and closer to your hands? The Stoics would tell you that meaning is not something delivered to you by the universe like a neatly wrapped gift. It is cultivated by the way you live each day, through your values, your choices, your character. Marcus once reminded himself, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He cut through the endless spiral of doubt by returning to action. What if, instead of waiting for life to feel meaningful, you practiced meaning in the simplest acts? Reaching out to someone, finishing a task with care, speaking honestly, sitting quietly with your own thoughts. Imagine life as a garden. The soil may not look promising at first, but if you place your seeds, small, daily acts of virtue, kindness, courage, the garden slowly begins to grow. Would you notice how meaning is less about waiting for flowers to appear and more about planting them again and again? So let me ask you, what seed could you plant today? Not tomorrow, not next year, but in this small space of time you still hold. What gesture, however small, could shift the way you stand in this fog? The Stoics teach us that life may always remain uncertain, fragile, and fleeting. But they also teach that within that fleetingness lies freedom. If nothing lasts forever, then what matters is not the permanence of meaning, but the presence of it in the moment you live it. And perhaps, as you reflect on this, you can ask yourself, what if my task is not to find the eternal meaning of life, but to live in such a way that each day, in its own fragile way, carries meaning enough? This is the first path through the fog, the Stoic path, not of grand answers, but of daily choices, not of waiting for clarity, but of practicing it. And as you walk it, you may begin to see that meaning is not something to be solved once and for all, but something to be lived, here and now. The Stoics remind you that meaning can be practiced in the present moment. Yet sometimes, even with their wisdom, the silence inside feels louder than action. You may ask yourself, if I keep planting seeds, why does the soil still feel barren? If life is so fragile, fleeting, and easily broken, is it even worth it? This question has echoed through centuries, and it became the heart of existential philosophy. Albert Camus once wrote, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." He did not write this to glorify despair, but to face it with brutal honesty. For Camus, the world appeared absurd, a vast universe indifferent to our hopes, our struggles, our longings for clarity. The stars do not answer our cries. The silence of existence can feel unbearable. But Camus's answer was not to surrender. Instead, he said, "Rebel, live in defiance of the absurd." The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Think of that myth, Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder up the hill, only for it to roll down again. What could be more pointless? And yet, Camus imagines him smiling. Why? Because even if the task is endless, even if the universe offers no grand explanation, meaning can still be created in the act of pushing. What about you? When you feel life is pointless, could it be that the very act of choosing to keep walking, keep creating, keep loving, even in the face of the void, is itself a form of meaning? Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps, offered another way of looking. He wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." Yet he did not claim meaning was given from the outside. He saw meaning as something each person must create, even in suffering. He described three sources of meaning: in creating something, in experiencing something or someone, and in the attitude we take towards suffering. When everything else is stripped away, when freedom seems lost, one freedom remains: the freedom to choose your response. What if, even in your emptiness, you still hold that freedom? The freedom to say, yes, the world may be silent, but I will not be. Yes, suffering may come, but I will choose how to face it. Yes, meaning may be fragile, but I will create it through the way I live. Nietzsche, too, walked this path. He challenged the old assurances of religion and tradition, declaring, "God is dead." But this was not only a statement of loss, it was a challenge. If the old sources of meaning no longer hold, then the task falls to you. You must create. You must shape your own values. He wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Meaning is not something you passively receive. It is something you forge, like iron in fire. Can you see how empowering this is? Even when life feels empty, even when all the old whys crumble, you can still create a new why. But perhaps you wonder, what if I don't know what to create? What if the blank canvas terrifies me? That is natural. Standing before emptiness is daunting. But what if you saw the blankness not as a void, but as possibility, a horizon not yet painted? Ask yourself, if you could shape even a fragment of your life into meaning, what would it look like? What would you create if you were free to define it? What values would you choose if they were no longer handed down by tradition, society, or expectation? Imagine standing on the shore at dawn. The sky is pale, the sun not yet risen. The sea stretches endlessly, quiet and vast. In this moment, you may feel small, but you may also feel possibility. The horizon does not tell you what meaning is, but it invites you to step into the day and decide. So perhaps the question is not, what is the meaning of life? But what meaning will I give to my life here today? Camus tells you to live in rebellion, to embrace the absurd without surrender. Frankl tells you to create meaning even in suffering. Nietzsche tells you to forge values with courage, to make your own why. And all three, in their own way, whisper the same truth. The void is not the end. It is the beginning. The emptiness you feel is not the proof that life is meaningless. It is the invitation to create, to shape, to live with defiant authenticity. So let me ask you, when was the last time you chose? Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. When was the last time you created something, no matter how small, and felt it reflected something of your inner self? Could it be that your meaning waits for you there? In the choice, in the creation, in the courage to step forward despite the silence? This is the existential horizon. Not a finished answer, but a wide and open space where you can decide to live, to love, to create, even without certainty. And maybe, in that act of creation, the fog begins to lift, and the path beneath your feet begins to glow again. The Stoics invite you to practice meaning in your daily choices. The existentialists challenge you to create meaning in the face of life's silence. And now, psychology offers another perspective, one that studies the patterns of our inner life, not only as philosophy, but as lived experience. Viktor Frankl, who bridged philosophy and psychology, called his approach logotherapy, healing through meaning. He saw that people could endure unimaginable suffering when they held a sense of purpose. But when that purpose was lost, even ordinary life became unbearable. Frankl explained that meaning is not found by chasing happiness directly. It is discovered in three ways: through creating or doing something, through experiencing someone or something deeply, and through the attitude we take toward inevitable suffering. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, which of these three speaks to you now? Is there something you long to create, even if it seems small? Is there someone or something that stirs a quiet gratitude within you? Or is life asking you to choose your attitude in the face of pain that cannot be avoided? Perhaps you notice that meaning is less about waiting for life to hand you answers, and more about orienting yourself toward values that give direction. Psychology calls this self-determination theory, the idea that human beings flourish when three needs are met: autonomy, competence, and connection. Autonomy, the sense that you are the author of your own choices. Competence, the sense that you are capable of growth and effectiveness. Connection, the sense that you belong. that your life touches others. When these needs are neglected, life begins to feel empty. But when they are nourished, even simple experiences carry weight. Can you recall a time when you felt deeply connected, when someone truly listened, or when you truly saw someone else? Did it not feel meaningful even if nothing grand was achieved? Ask yourself, what choices in your life give you a genuine sense of authorship? When do you feel most alive in your own hands, rather than living by someone else's script? Or think about competence. When was the last time you learned something, practiced something, improved at something? Did you notice how the act of growing, however slowly, gave you a glimpse of purpose? And then, connection. When was the last time you gave your presence to another human being without distraction? Or when someone gave theirs to you? Did it not remind you that life is not a solitary burden, but a shared journey? Values psychology tells us that meaning arises when we align our lives with what truly matters to us. Values are not goals, they are directions. A goal is something you reach. A value is something you walk toward, step after step, without end. Imagine you are lost in a forest. A compass cannot take you out instantly, but it can point you north. Values are that compass. They remind you where to walk, even when the path is unclear. So, ask yourself gently, what values matter most to me? Is it kindness, creativity, growth, integrity, connection? When everything else feels stripped away, which directions still feel worth walking toward? Meaning often fades when we forget these inner compasses and live only by external measures, achievements, possessions, recognition. These may satisfy for a moment, but they rarely sustain. What lasts is the quiet alignment of your actions with your values. Psychology also reminds us that emptiness itself can be reframed. Sometimes, what you call pointlessness is not a flaw in you, but a signal that you have outgrown an old story, and your mind is inviting you to write a new one. What if the blankness you feel is less a dead end, and more the open page waiting for your next chapter? Consider this. When you were younger, what gave you meaning? And now, what feels stale, worn out, or borrowed from others? If some of those meanings have crumbled, does that not mean you are being invited to craft meanings more authentically your own? Perhaps you ask, but what if I fail? What if I choose wrongly? Psychology reminds us that purpose is not about perfection. It is about engagement. It is about living in the questions, experimenting, trying, and adjusting. So, let me ask you, if you treated your life as an experiment in meaning, what small step would you try today? If the fog ahead cannot be cleared at once, what if you tested just one direction, one act of value, and noticed how it felt? Your emptiness is not proof of meaninglessness. It is proof that your heart is longing for alignment, that your spirit is calling you toward autonomy, competence, connection, and values that matter. And in listening to that call, you may find that the fog is not an enemy but a guide, showing you that what you seek is not outside you, but within the choices you are ready to make. You have walked with the Stoics. You have faced the silence with the existentialists. You have explored psychology's guidance. But still, there is the world you wake into each day, a modern world unlike any other before it. This world is loud. It glows with constant screens, endless comparisons, and a tide of voices that never rests. And in this noise, the feeling of pointlessness often grows stronger, not weaker. Think about how easily you are pulled into the endless scroll, images of other lives, polished and perfected, set against the quiet reality of your own. Do you notice how quickly comparison poisons meaning? You measure yourself against fragments, and your own life begins to look small. But tell me, when did meaning ever grow in comparison? Isn't meaning always found in presence, in the moments that no one else sees? Technology can connect us, yet it can also fracture us. We speak more, but do we listen? We see more, but do we notice? Have you felt it? That strange loneliness that arrives not in silence, but in noise, surrounded by voices and yet unseen? The modern age also carries the weight of pressure to achieve, to produce, to always move faster. You may feel that your worth is tied to performance, to numbers, to visible results. But when life is reduced to productivity, is it any wonder that it feels empty? A machine can produce, but only a human can pause, reflect, and give meaning to what they do. Ask yourself, whose standards are you living by? Are they truly yours, or are they borrowed from a culture that never rests, never feels enough? What if the pointlessness you feel is not a failure of your soul, but a sign that you are measuring life by the wrong scale? There is also the quiet crisis of identity. In a world that tells you to be yourself, but simultaneously pressures you to fit in, who are you allowed to be? How much of your life has been shaped by expectation, family, society, tradition, rather than by your own authentic compass? Perhaps the emptiness you feel is a whisper, a reminder that the mask you wear is not your true face. What if life feels pointless, not because life has no meaning, but because the life you are living does not yet reflect your own? And then there is disconnection from nature. For thousands of years, human beings lived in rhythm with the earth. Sunrise and sunset, seasons, rivers, winds, stars. Now, many of us live in boxes, lit by artificial light, surrounded by concrete, forgetting the sky. Could it be that part of your emptiness comes from this severed bond? When was the last time you stood beneath an open sky without rushing, without distraction? Did you notice how even silence feels alive there? Modernity is not your enemy, but it requires awareness. If you drift with it unconsciously, it will drain you. But if you engage it with intention, it can serve you. Technology can distract, but it can also connect. Culture can pressure, but it can also inspire. The question is, how will you meet it? Ask yourself, what voices in your daily life are truly yours, and what voices are echoes of the crowd? What would it look like to reclaim even a small space each day for what is authentic, quiet, and real? Perhaps you could begin by carving out little sanctuaries, a morning without screens, an evening walk beneath the sky, a conversation where you truly listen, a task done with care for its own sake. These are small rebellions against the flood, and yet they hold profound meaning. Because meaning in the modern age is not about escaping the world, but about remembering yourself within it. It is about learning to pause when everything tells you to rush, to listen when everything shouts, to create when everything consumes. And so I ask you, when was the last time you felt genuinely present, not scattered across 1,000 distractions, but rooted in a single moment? What if you gave yourself permission to return to that presence again and again until the noise began to quiet? Modern life may wrap you in fog, but within it lies the same opportunity as in every age, to live authentically, to choose consciously, to plant meaning not in what the world demands, but in what your heart recognizes as true. Have you noticed how life often feels like a paradox? On one hand, we are told that we must achieve, strive, and succeed. On the other, we are reminded that everything passes, that time erases even the greatest of names. So where does meaning hide in this contradiction? Perhaps it is not in the applause nor in the legacy, but in the quiet recognition that being alive right now is itself a gift. Think of the countless chances that had to align for you to exist in this moment, the history of the universe, the delicate chain of ancestors, the fragile breath you hold. If all of this is not enough to suggest meaning, what else could? The Stoics believed that the fact we are alive, even for a brief instant, is already reason enough to live with gratitude. But gratitude is not passive. It transforms how we see the world. When life feels empty, ask yourself, What small thing can I honor today? A cup of tea savored slowly, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of sunlight on your face. These are not distractions from meaning. They are meaning itself, condensed into moments. It is true that life may not offer the grand answers we expect. Perhaps there is no single ultimate purpose written in stone. But does that make life worthless? Or does it mean we are free? Free to create, free to love, free to shape our own story? When life feels pointless, remember, the point is not given, it is made. You make it each time you rise from despair, each time you choose kindness, each time you notice beauty that others overlook. The point is to live, to feel, to grow. So the next time emptiness visits you, do not run from it. Sit with it. Let it remind you that in a vast, uncertain universe, your life is still here, fragile, temporary, precious. And in this brief existence, you have the power to choose how to meet it, with bitterness or with courage, with despair or with wonder. And maybe, just maybe, that choice is the meaning you were searching for all along.